So we saw what the president said yesterday and the action that happened thereafter. He communicated back to the National Assembly yesterday with a presidential memorandum referral by the President of the Republic to the Speaker of the National Assembly, where he says, now, considering that there's a bill that has been brought to me for presidential assent, and in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, taking into consideration the widespread expression of dissatisfaction by members of the public on the contents of the finance bill, in exercise of the powers conferred to me by the Constitution, and having reservations on the contents of the bill in its entirety, I decline to assent to the finance bill and refer the bill for reconsideration by the National Assembly with a recommendation for the deletion of all the clauses thereof. Basically, he's saying, take it back, delete everything. Now, we want to understand, what does this basically mean and translate? We are joined by an advocate who is also the Deputy Secretary General of Narc-Kenya, Asha Bashir, in the studio. Good morning, Asha.
Good morning, Eric.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you.
It's been a long time coming, right? Wanting to have you here for a while. It's good to have you here today.
Thank you,
How are you
Eric.
feeling?
I'm okay.
Very good.
On a sad day, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, many deaths. We are mourning, of course, those that died, but also looking back at, okay, so let's reflect. What does this mean for our country going forward? To welcome you to the conversation, CT will give you the day's proverb. CT, why don't you welcome our guest?
What you've just done isn't lost on me, by the way. The two of you clearing your throats as you mentioned senior citizens.
I was cold outside.
Of course it is. Yes, Eric, you were saying something.
Yeah. Our guest.
Yes.
Welcome her with the day's proverb.
I will. Okay. And I'm not going to have a senior moment in case you're thinking that that's what's going to happen. Our proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. This is a simple, straightforward proverb. Too large a morsel chokes the child.
Too large a morsel chokes the child.
Yes.
Asha, what do you think this means?
That's very, very a good proverb, actually, for a day like this. For me, it's if I relate it to this country, then it is the current situation. If you don't handle something, it becomes bigger and you're not able to handle it. So for me, in simple terms, it's quite speaking to the current situation in the country. If we do not listen, if we do not take measures, then we will have an elephant in the room, and therefore we will not be able to swallow it.
Nice one. The morsel will become too large.
Yes.
And it will choke this child.
Yes. And the child now, in this context, is Kenya.
Very good. Very good. So, Wakwili, a quick one, eh? This commission of the President and the communication back to Parliament with the memorandum, where he says, and it's of course preceded by the national address that he made and said, I have heard what the Kenyan people are saying. It's not about piecemeal amendments to the bill. It's basically the entire principle of raising more taxes, even by a shilling, that they do not want. And I concede that we shall not go that route again. And therefore, I'm asking Parliament to then take action. Now, when he sends it back to Parliament and says, I recommend that you delete all clauses, what does that mean?
So, first of all, it's unfortunate that it got to that level, because this is something you should have handled earlier. That's my genuine opinion. You don't wait for lives, bloodshed, for you to now sit ground. Secondly, what he did yesterday was basically say that, yes, I've listened finally to what Kenyans are saying about this bill, and I revert the bill. What normally happens by law is that he can revert it via memorandum. And this memorandum, there are options. Of course, one, he can give the recommendation. That's one option, which now he did last night by saying that I'm recommending for the entire clauses to be deleted. However, there's an elephant in the room, because that leaves two options to Parliament. Parliament is on recess. Remember, a bill, it's a bill until there's presidential assent, because when there's an assent is when now we can call it an act. So for now, it's still a bill. The minute he referred it back to Parliament through a memorandum, then there's the elephant in the room, because the two options are, yes, Parliament the Speaker can call for a special sitting because we all know they're on recess, and they debate on this matter, and the mover of the motion now will be the majority leader. So he'll move the motion and say, the president recommends this. Now, where there's the elephant in the room is that there are two options at that stage. Parliament might decide to consider the recommendations of the president and therefore abide by it, or might decide we want to stick to the initial, to the bill as it is. Okay? Or the third option actually is that they might decide to make some alterations. However, yes, it is true that he did the memorandum. But this war is not done for Kenyans until Parliament sits and through the special sitting, and the mover of the motion, who's the majority leader, tables and actually says that this motion I'm tabling, the president has. So he does what we call the censoring and says, now this is what has been presented by the president.
Right.
But if the members of assembly, and we're looking at the worst case scenario for Kenyans, the members of parliament say, we are not going to go with the recommendations of the president, and they have a right under the constitution to return the bill as it is. What happens? Okay? So this is an interesting situation.
Yeah, what happens legally?
Because if they return, the president has the option of either ascending to it, we are back to that stage, or not ascending. Because remember, his recommendations have not been followed to the latter. So if he doesn't ascend, of course, within 14 days, after the 14 days, it becomes a law.
14 days of
from the period that it has been reverted by the Speaker of the National Assembly. So for now, we need the 2/3 members to vote for that bill. So I'm not worried, like I saw Kenyans saying, whether the House will sit because they're on recess. There's a ground. They can call for a special. Yeah, they can sit on a special like they did yesterday. And if there's goodwill from the members of Parliament and the executive, then they can ensure that bill ends and dies automatically there by following the recommendations of the president. However, if the members of Parliament, because we again are still guided by this document, if they decide to exercise the doctrine of separation of powers and say, you know what, we've looked at the recommendations, however, we still believe this bill is good for Kenyans, they can still return it. So it doesn't die an automatic death at that moment.
I've got a question. When the leader of majority comes now to the floor of the House and says, this is the memorandum from the president, and then they have to decide, is there a threshold of the number of members of parliament who have to agree with the president?
2/3.
2/3 of members of parliament.
So what happens, Eric, in both situations, if they decide that the mover of the motion, which is now the majority leader, says, I'm tabling this and this is the recommendation, they will debate, and of course 2/3 will vote. If 2/3 vote in favor of what the president said, then it dies there. However, if again 2/3 decide we are now not going to follow that route, we feel the bill is right for the country, then it moves to that stage of reverting it back to the president through the National Assembly Speaker.
Okay, so Asha, what is it right now? Does it in this moment, because it seems as though it's like no man's land, but neither here nor there, with then the decline to assent, as well as the recommendation for total seizure of it, right?
Yeah.
So what is it actually? Is it a parliamentary suggestion? Is it still a bill? What is it?
So at this stage, it's like I said, it becomes an act once the president assents to it.
Yeah.
For now, it's a bill.
Okay.
He's reverted it back. So reverting it back with recommendations, because he might choose. There are options in the law that he might say, I'm going to be quiet. Of course, the lapse of 14 days from the moment, then it becomes a law. He might decide what he has done now, revert back to Parliament with recommendations.
Yeah.
However, now that's what I'm saying with the recommendations. There are two options here.
He can do this or
the members can decide to look at what he's saying and see, okay, we have the 2/3, so we vote and voila, the bill is gone. The second option is, no, we feel there's a doctrine of separation of powers and we, as members of Parliament, think this bill is good.
Okay, so it still remains a bill for now.
Yes.
Can we go with conjecture? I mean, and I'm not saying can we do it now, but I'm saying that if we see what has happened historically, where members of parliament in the majority are of the party for which the president also happens to be the party leader.
Yes.
We have seen historically that they have gone ahead with what a party position is. What we also hear yesterday is that this is a party position. It is. He was flanked by members of the party who are members of parliament as well. So can we say that it is likely that they will go with what the position is of the president, who also happens to be the party leader? Can we go with that conjecture?
You know, it's in a country, and forgive me, in a country where people don't respect this document, that's where we fall. Because right now, the conduct of the members of parliament shows there's no trust in it. Okay? You are elected by the people of Kenya to come and actually legislate on their behalf. Your employer is not the political party. Your employer is the people of Kenya. So the minute you delegate and you decide now, no, my employer is the party leader and so I'm going to follow the party leader. Yes, in normal regimes, they have the numbers. And that's why somehow we find ourselves in the situation we are, that laws are passed that are not favorable to Mwananchi because we have the muscle and we say we have the numbers. However, on this specific situation, the issue is the goodwill. Because you can look at it, it might be the head of state has goodwill and decides, okay, I'm going to, after seeing what has happened, I'm ceding ground and yes, I will marshal my troops to give the 2/3, okay? Or it might be again a gameplay, because in Kenya anything can happen. It might be a gameplay that I'm washing my hands off this and saying, you know what, me, I did my part as a president, I did not ascend, I reverted it back to Parliament. Parliament has done what it has done. I have no power. And legally, yes, he cannot overstep on that institution because it's a different arm of government altogether. However, like I said, where does the buck stop? The presidency, yeah? But then it also stops on the members of Parliament. Because had they listened, and it's quite unfortunate that we have to wait until there's a lot of bloodshed for us to have this national conversation. And the national conversation is happening at a time where we have a problem and a serious crisis of leadership not following the constitution. My sister, I'll tell you, if today you have a problem and you're arrested, even for traffic or a minor offense, the law will follow up with you.
Yeah.
But the same does not apply. So that's why I've always said there's selective justice. So it seems we are moving, telling Kenyans now, respect the rule of law. But the same does not apply. So where we are as a country is because we decided we're not going to listen to the 2010 constitution. And as such now, we've decided to run the show and do what we feel we are the own constitution. So that anarchy is where we have an issue. And you can see clearly, if it's interesting to watch, because if the parliament decides to follow the recommendations of the president through the memorandum that he did last night, then we'll see there's goodwill as a Kenyan. But if Parliament now says no, as we think, then you'll know it's just a gameplay, because that's what has been happening. You can see how the president and the deputy are reading from different scripts. Yes. So we are in a government of blame game.
But the likelihood of, because we have seen the members of parliament from Kenya Kwanza going with the president, the likelihood of them not going with the president this time is slim, right? Now, we need 2/3 of members of parliament to make a decision on this one. 2/3 of 349 is 232.
Yes.
It's possible to get 232?
Yes, it is possible.
Okay.
That is if the opposition agrees to play game.
That is not only the opposition. For me, like I said, Eric, and I'm coming back, if there's no mischief.
From anyone? From
both the executive and now the parliamentarians. Because you see, if there's mischief, it is easy for me, if I was the head of state, to say I did my part.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because I can come and say,
so the mischief here could be this whole thing is just a game.
It's just a game.
I'm returning it, and then when you guys
for
go
public,
in there,
just because the pressure is too much, I'm returning it. I've followed the law. I've done the memorandum. I've said revert. But Parliament has the powers to say we still feel this document is the best.
And then you will come back today and say, there's a position whereby you could actually come back and say, look, man, I did what
Parliament refused to.
Yeah, I did my recommendation, but the Parliament voted not to follow or provided the bill. Or you see that the power now lies in Parliament.
And there would be an individual member of parliament who would actually now come out to the public and show their head as being the one that says, I do not want to amend this bill.
Yes.
But are we saying, therefore, that the reality of the conversation we're having, in that the MPs who are aligned to the president, the Kenya Kwanza Brigade, that there is a likelihood or not of them actually taking orders as they've been taking orders before? Is that not the discussion? Is there a likelihood that they would not take orders?
Because historically we have seen that, and we have heard that if this is the position that has been spelt out in whatever manner, that usually they
follow. I think what Asha is saying is that we are not sure what order they've been given.
Voila.
I'm in agreement.
Okay.
In fact, that responds to the thing I'm saying, because what, as Eric said today, on the face of it, these are words that we've heard, but what have they been told? What script saying, since this is the demand, this is what will be spoken, so it is heard. However,
that is political suicide.
Because for me, I'm looking at it. There's no, why I'm saying that perhaps, and I use the word perhaps, there's a mischief, is because look at how even the voting happened. The rush, the pressure. The government knew clearly Kenyans don't want, unless you live in another planet. But if you live here, you could see clearly Kenyans of all walks are saying it is not even about the young people anymore. But all Kenyans are saying, for the first time, it's issue-based. We're saying, no, we don't want this bill. But you keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. Then all of a sudden, look at the speech he made the day before at night, which for me was quite wrong, but look at that speech and then the turn of events the next day. So for me as a Kenyan, and I speak for myself, I will only trust the process until when the MPs do a special sitting and vote and say, now this is done and we are following the recommendations of the president. Before then, it's just a game.
Asha, on Tuesday you saw Saul. On Wednesday you saw Paul. Okay? Yeah. Something happened on the road to Damascus. It's possible. If members of parliament go and vote and they say delete every clause, what then happens? Does it cease being a bill?
Yes, it ceases. So what we will now be back to, because there is no crisis, you see, we'll just go back to the last year's finance bill, 2023, which is now an act, and the Appropriation Act for last year, and the country moves on. Now, the only issue that we have right now is that, like I said, is this process. Will the special sitting take place? Because remember, he's given the recommendation back to the House.
Okay.
So now the ball is in the National Assembly. Okay? So in the National Assembly, any eventuality can happen. The good side is that they might listen and decide we now move on forward and say we are actually considering the recommendations and we voted 2/3 and we are good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this is the finance bill.
Yes.
The appropriations bill is a different bill altogether.
Yes.
And there's an appropriations bill for 2024, 2025.
Yes.
Which is based on some revenue projection that includes some 340-something billion shillings that was contained in the finance bill.
Yes.
So should Parliament also then relook the appropriations bill?
Yeah, but you see,
like, is it expected? Is it going to be procedural that if you then, if even if last week they had rejected anything with the finance bill in the second reading, would Parliament then be forced to relook at the appropriations?
Yes, but you see, once this bill, because they are working hand in hand.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just like it's like the two hands or two fingers in your hand. So basically, like I said, there's no much crisis because we will, first of all, if the bill dies, then we revert to the previous 2023 bill, the one that we've been using 2022-2023, the budget allocated. Now, for the appropriation bill, the appropriation bill, remember, is depicting figures that are not in tandem with this.
Yep.
So they have the option of the 60-day to amend, but now because there's no bill to amend to, automatically we relapse back to the 2023 Act, 2022-2023 bill act that was passed and the Appropriation Act that was passed at that time. So there's no vacuum per se.
Isn't the Appropriation Act time-bound?
But now,
isn't it for a 12-month period?
Yes, but now we have the 60-day window period that now Parliament will revisit on that.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So they must still revisit the appropriations
they must, so
bill.
that it works in tandem with the current bill that we're going to use in terms of revenue.
Okay.
But as when the way the politicians were putting it that there's crisis, there's no crisis. We will still use the previous bill and life will go on.
We can still
the
operate
2023,
on
yes,
Okay.
the budget will continue.
Let's
the
take a
country
break.
won't come to a standstill.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.